Hello, everyone, and welcome. I want to start today's conversation with a few thank yous. So first and foremost, thank you, Rebecca and Johnny, for being here and sharing your time with me. Next, I'd like to thank Stark White, especially Dominic, who helped make this exhibition possible. I'd also like to thank Brian Butler, who trusted in me and gave me the opportunity to lead these talks. I'd like to thank the other two artists, Anya O'Neill and Joaquin Tan, who I spoke with earlier this week. And lastly, everyone who's come to see the show. It's been such a lovely experience. So before we get into the conversation, I'm just going to introduce Rebecca and Johnny to everyone. So bear with me while I read these bios. So Rebecca Baumann is an artist based in Perth. Baumann's practice spans a range of media, including kinetic sculpture, photography, performance, digital animation, and installation. Her work is characterized by a kaleidoscopic use of color, which stems from an interest in the relationship between color and emotion, drawing on research in psychology, sociology, color theory, and art history to create work that is often effervescent and unpredictable, suggestive of both the fleetingness of time and the transient nature of emotion. Baumann has work represented throughout top museum collections, including the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia. She's exhibited widely domestically and internationally and has been awarded several international residencies in New York, India, Berlin, and most recently Finland. Jonny Niesche is an artist based in Sydney, Australia, who graduated with a Master's of Visual Arts from Sydney University in 2003 after completing a class in sculpture at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna in 2012. He works across an expanded field of painting, sculpture, and abstraction, with works which explore the intrinsic relationship between color, form, and light in order to produce formal and optically charged works that challenge our perception of space. He has exhibited widely across Australia, as well as abroad in such places as London, Vienna, and most recently, you may have seen his work at the Hole in New York. Nietzsche's work is held in a number of collections, including Art Bank Sydney, Museum of New and Old Art Hobart, and National Gallery Victoria in Melbourne, as well as private collections in Europe, United States, Canada, Asia, and Australia. So with that out of the way, we can just get started on the conversation. I've asked Johnny and Rebecca, just like I asked Anya and Yuk earlier this week, to reflect on their relationship between color and time in their work for this exhibition, both how they approach it formally and conceptually. And with Jochen and Anya, I sort of started the conversation off with a little quote that I thought sort of spoke to the affinities between their work, and I figured I'd start this talk in the same way. So the quote I've picked is from Kandinsky, and it is, "Color provokes a psychic vibration. Color hides a power still unknown but real, which acts on every part of the human body." And I wanted to start with this because I thought it sort of spoke to an affinity that your work shares, which is not just an interest in color and how it operates compositionally, but also in the more immaterial qualities that it has in terms of its very real effect on bodies, both in very precise biological ways, but also in more ineffable psychic or emotive ways. So I guess with that, we can get started, maybe sharing a few of your reactions to that quote and a few initial thoughts on color.
Do you want to start, Rebecca?
I was going to say, could you say the quote one more time? Sorry.
Oh yeah,
that was really good, but just go again.
Yeah, so Kandinsky says, "Color provokes a psychic vibration. Color hides a power still unknown but real, which acts on every part of the human body."
Yeah, I think I sort of the way I react to that quote, I think it's about how, the body, I think about the body a lot in, I guess, my work, but also, in relation to color. I mean, I think color is it's almost like, it's a pre-verbal thing. It's, in nature, it communicates with us, right? Like, don't eat these red poison berries or, whatever. But I think I've always been really interested, like from even my earliest work, probably without realizing what it was I think that it has this sort of power to I'm quite interested in the idea of the sort of pre-verbal, or the sort of the unconscious, and I think colour sort of, has the ability to sort of, go to those kind of areas and affect and have an effect on your body, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the way I think about color is that it's on the surface of everything we see all the time. It's kind of like this membrane between the thing, or between our eyes and the experience. And it's kind of, for me, it's inextricably linked to every experience I have. There's always colour everywhere that's present, and certain colours are really strongly linked to certain experiences. And I personally, within my work, try and tap back into colours that really strike a chord in me within a particular way, and then try and work with that. Yeah.
Well, because I think it's interesting, that because I think color, as well as, I guess something I'm interested in is that it's incredibly universal, unless you're completely blind. Everyone has an experience of color in some ways, but it's also quite subjective. Like, my husband is actually colorblind, so his experience, so it's quite funny actually. Someone it's so his experience of like red and green is quite different. But I don't really understand exactly what that is. So I think that's an interesting thing of, it's like, how do you talk about your experience of that color red? And it becomes very relational, like sky blue, or
definitely
this, but there's no language to talk about that experience. It becomes about experience, and I think how we all sort of do experience the world, and are sort of going the trajectory of our lives of aging and things like that. But we also don't really know what it is to experience the world through someone else's eyes, in a way. So it's sort of both quite subjective, but it's also sort of universal. I kind of like how it sort of sits in that sort of space. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, because you definitely can't kind of put a work together and assume someone's going to read it in any particular way whatsoever.
No.
Because everyone does have different experiences to colour. But on the other hand, I guess, like the universality that you might have an experience of colours that you might relate to, say, within a sunset or something like that, which is super cliched, but it's cliched in the sense that we've all had similar experiences of the feeling that is evoked within us through the colours within a sunset as well.
Which are then also change based on where you are in the world, because there is a very real environmental and temporal relationship to color, since it is light. Rebecca, your work is interesting. It's interesting that you bring up your husband who's colorblind, because your work also has that sound element to it and the movement. So there's this shifting of color too, which changes in space. And Jonny, your work also shifts depending on the light of colors. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that dynamic, the fact that it's unfixed.
I guess. Okay, do you want to go first, John? You go first.
No, you go. I don't mind.
I guess, all of my earliest works have been sort of kinetic, and I guess I was always interested in this idea of the work being different for a different audience member, for things, I guess, because just life isn't fixed, and the way that time moves and things change really subtly, and the experience of even your feelings across a day or something, and how sort of subtle some of those changes can be. And I think it's always about the idea of, for me, like that change is just the only constant you sort of have. And so I kind of like that sort of, I guess, part of the reason that I'm quite interested in that, and that sort of kinetic element to it. And I like the idea of, you could come back, you come to the gallery at like in the morning and then come back at the night, or it's still running and it's different again in the evening. And when I first, with these automated colour field works, when I first envisaged the work, I had envisioned this yellow one moment where it all went to one colour, which you know, it didn't happen. It's actually statistically possible, but not very probable. You know? So I kind of, yeah, I think it's sort of the, I guess I'm always something about the audience as well, I suppose, and how they move through space and how they, I guess they finish the work. I guess that do with any artwork, but I guess that's some of my thoughts around that idea.
Yeah, very similarly for me too. The trying to create an experiences that kind of, it's like life in a state of flux and not fixed at all. And I kind of try and bring in the elements like the light, how the light changes, and like you said, from a very side angle, how it might be super saturated and diffuse as you come around the front, and it's kind of like it changes as the viewer, and I think very much about how the viewer might navigate the space and how their experience will change, and like you say, complete the work, or quasi-performative in a sense, and have this triadic visual experience. And kind of started from when I was in my studio years ago, studying at the Sydney College of the Arts, and I was playing with glitter, and I was really obsessed with it at the time, and I wasn't quite sure why, and I just started playing with it and sticking it onto paintings. And it was late at night, and I'd had quite a few wines, I think, and I sat back and I was looking at a little glitter painting, and it was kind of pretty crap, but there was something I liked about it. There was one little light on, and then as I moved, it sparkled. And then as I moved again, it sparkled again in a different way. And there was kind of like this response between me and the painting, and just the painting and I were having this exact experience. And then I thought, how can you create experiences like that are kind of in a state of flux or dynamic and shifting? And that kind of sent me on that journey to try and think about making work in the way that I do now.
Something I've noticed with viewers of this exhibition with both of your works is there's this moment of sort of encounter and surprise where, Rebecca, they realize that your piece is moving, and Jonny in particular, the relationship between this work Feeling the Way, which has a slight transparency to it where you can see the wall through just slightly, and then the works which are mounted, which have a much sort of different optical effect, and that moment when the viewer realizes that they're slightly different, that the color fields have these different densities to them, and how that shifts the longer that they're in the space and the light plays on their eyes. And they usually come down to talk to me at that point, to ask about it.
Oh, cool.
Which I think is really interesting, that as they go upstairs, they have these moments of pause, and it has sort of interrupted that cadence, right, of viewership, which can sometimes seem very prescribed. Rebecca, maybe we can talk a little bit more about your choice of material, because it seems to be very specific in all of your work, and maybe how you arrive at choosing those materials.
Yeah, I think I started working with sort of, I suppose, commercial materials, everyday materials. Like one of my first works was a work called Confetti International, which was with actually confetti, and I started throwing that. So I guess it's similar to John's. I had a confetti moment, but like throwing that around a space and actually having this kind of, this sort of joyful moment, or this sort of moment of, you know, and imagining what would happen if you had this machine that, you know, sort of poured it up into the sky, and you just were in this constant falling confetti moment all the time. And that was kind of this improbable idea, but it sort of set me off in this, I guess, interest in, I think, you know, the sort of these sort of cheap throwaway materials, things that are in the world. And I guess because, like, you know, I always sort of looking at a material, thinking about how I could use it differently, or how I could activate it in a different way with, like, a, you know, sometimes it's been with a fan, or, you know, in this case, it's sort of, you know, color with, you know, like a clock. But it's always about, I guess, sort of thinking about, like, you know, the materials that are in the world, and sort of trying to flip their sort of inherent language maybe to sort of, I guess, think about, I guess, different things. But with these automated color field works, I was in Berlin, and I was doing a residency there, and I was working towards a show at the Australia Centre for Contemporary Art. And so I was sort of, I had known I wanted to sort of work with colour as sort of the subject and the object within the work. And I had wanted, to talk about sort of time and, sort of movement and all these sort of different things. And then I had this sort of moment in a train station where actually one of those old flipping, I think they're called or they're the arrival departure boards. And the sound is so evocative, right? And I sort of thought, what would happen if that was just color? And I actually did try and find one of those old boards, and I tried to find someone who could make them, and it was just going to be like incredibly expensive. So I started thinking about, I guess that's often a part of my process as well, as like something being very expensive and then trying to like distill it down into like its most base form. And so then I kind of came across sort of these clocks, and I guess, I think what is interesting about this work is that it does tell the time in a way, but it's like so abstracted that it doesn't make sense to you anymore. But I like to think of it, the way that our perception of time changes so much. Like you can feel like a day drags out or it speeds up, and I feel like that this work kind of, sort of talks to that sort of experience. But yeah, so it was sort of through that process that I came across these flip clocks, and then sort of did just that, like change the time, the number cards with coloured cards, and made this sort of colour. There was a big exhibition of colour field paintings at the Deutsche Bank. I can't remember what it's called, gallery, but it's called something else now. But yeah, there was lots of different things feeding in, and that's what I came up with. I think I sort of went a bit on a tangent there, but
That's good to hear the story behind it.
Oh yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I called like Deutsche Bahn and stuff, like the train thing, and I was like, can I? I'm terrible German, like trying to. It was like so ridiculous. They were like, who are you?
Did you ever use Google Translate? I did that when I was in Vienna and write emails with Google Translate. And then I'd show a friend who spoke German. It was just so wrong. It was hilarious.
No. So a lot of the time, I find those parts of it by like doing things it's time consuming, but it's quite interesting part of it. I'm like trying to like find this way of doing something. Like I guess I've done like works with coloured smoke and things, and I was going to make it, and then I was going to do something else, and I'm trying to, and then in the end you find a pyrotechnician, and it's sort of all those stories which maybe aren't. I guess that's with any artist, right? Part of their work, which maybe
totally.
These automated works have been quite large in the past as well. Do you feel like there is a shift that the shift in scale creates for the viewer?
I think with every when they're like I guess initially I was sort of it's that sort of field of vision thing, and and taking in your whole body, taking it in, which I suppose is like a way of when you think about being in nature or in a like the sunset example, and it's sort of you sort of drink it in with your whole body. And I suppose there was that thing that of wanting to sort of create that sort of affect in the body, and to I don't know if I was sort of directly thinking about the experience as a sublime experience, or I think you did ask also about beauty, and I guess I more think about color and things as, because I think as sort of a way to maybe a way that people can sort of access the work as well. Like it's an entry point, I suppose, where you can just in sort of I guess be affected by that experience of color without having to know anything else, and that could also just be enough. And then there are other layers and things.
I was interested because I feel this work, I feel personally when I look at it, it's like has a very intimate scale to it, and I feel like it very much relates to like me as an individual. And when I'm sitting at my desk and working, I can hear it, and so I have these sort of like little moments where mostly through the day, I don't register the sound, and then it will like all of a sudden jump out at me, and it it's actually really very soothing.
Oh, good. It's not annoying because it's they're quite loud, actually. They're quite loud.
Oh no, they're not at all. It's actually like been a really lovely experience getting to have that relationship to the work, because it's, you know, it's not something that a viewer who comes, they don't have that sort of durational over weeks of like
Yeah.
living with something. And so I was curious sort of what the effect is when it's a much larger scale, and the kind of, if there was a sort of more overwhelming relationship to the body that happens in that sense.
Well, I think also, like, I think one of the things that it really does as well is like, I don't know if it's overwhelming. I mean, I guess it's a little bit louder, but I think there's that anticipation of wanting to catch that next moment, which I think is kind of, and so you sort of just missing things out of the corner of your eye. And I've had people, it's been reported back to me that people in the gallery have sat in front of it trying to catch one of them falling, which I found quite an interesting thing, you know. And so I think
exhibition as well.
Oh, has it? Yeah, I think that thing of, I guess it's, I always think that as that anticipation of a moment or something, you know, that everyone's always sort of waiting for something to happen, or, and that wasn't necessarily something I anticipated when I made the work, and then it was something, the way people really reacted to it, really, yeah, wanting to catch. It's sort of like the larger one to me, it was almost like rain as well, you know. Yeah.
Jonny, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts also on sort of strategies of invitation to the work, because I know your work has been talked about in sort of this almost like seductive quality to the color, and that you have an interest in the sort of parasocial relationship of the works to the viewer.
Yeah. I guess I'm really interested in the idea of seduction or of desire, and you know, the amount of images that we're hit with all the time from advertising that's always geared at sex and your desire, kind of. And I was reading I can't remember who the quote was, but it was talking about a desire-like situation where you're looking in a shop window at something you want, and at some point you're apprehended by your own image within that circumstance. And that really struck me as an interesting kind of thing. It really resonated. And I thought, how can I play with desire, and how can I extract colors that really speak to that? But yeah, so I'm just kind of fascinated with makeup ads and fashion ads. I'm obsessed with high fashion, with makeup, with color palettes in makeup. All these colors that it's, you know, it's so geared to seduce you. And I had an experience when I was quite young with my mum, where we went into she was like dragging me around the shops, and we'll get this and we'll get that. And we went into the cosmetic department of a store, and I remember standing there looking at all these colors and these smoky, beautiful kind of eyeshadows and things, not even knowing what they were or what they did, and knowing it was, you know, girl stuff. And I just loved it. I just like had this like deep attraction to it instantly. And that kind of resonated. It was like, at that stage, was a really guilty pleasure for me, in the sense that I didn't know how to deal with, oh, I love makeup. I mean, I don't like wearing makeup. I'd be happy to wear it. I don't have a problem with that. But there was something about those colors and the soft tones, and I guess something that kind of sits on the surface of the skin and attenuates the way you read what you're looking at, I found in retrospect really interesting.
Makeup compacts also are quite object-like and sculptural, which a lot of your work takes on. One of the pieces, or two of the pieces in this exhibition.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that kind of exploring those ideas and shapes and forms, and also read a paraphrase really badly. Michel Serres, a French philosopher who I really like, talks about the epistemology of the word cosmos and cosmetics, and how they're linked from the early Greek language, early Latin, and the cosmos and cosmetics. So like the idea of the depth of decoration and embellishment, and the cosmos are linked from their language beginnings. And I think that's a really interesting thing for me to think about and play with within my work. So in one sense, talking about the sublime and trying to create some void-like experience, or this like infinite distance within the work, or void, and at the same time being very much about surface and beauty and the decorative, and trying to find a space and a tension between those two.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach the objectness of your work in relation to that? Because sort of my experience of viewing the work, I feel like especially in this piece, the mirrored edge, it's that sort of almost little bit of like sleight of hand or wink almost at the viewer that slightly disrupts or interrupts that experience of being sucked in. And that's something that I found really gratifying. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, or how that functions in your practice.
Yeah, sure. I spent a lot of time thinking about the frame and how the frame works and operates and what it does. And I think at university, one particular lecturer was always asking me, why am I putting a frame around my work? And this was in the very early days. And we were talking about how it was constricting the work and stopping its potential to flow beyond the edges of the work. And at some point, playing with the mirrors, it seemed like you could, in a way, play with the quasi-aura of the work and have the work respond to the light circumstances and kind of emanate outwards in a way, and also inwards in the sense that all the shadows, often the way when it's lit, the reflections and the shadows are opposites and act off in a, I don't know how to explain that, kind of like the inversion of each other as they play on the wall. But it was a way of kind of trying to bring the object of the work emanating into the space a little bit as well.
Rebecca, your color choice, is it something that is rooted in like the availability of the material, or the material sort of dictates the colors that will happen? Or is that something where there might be a more personal internal logic to it that the viewer doesn't necessarily know?
So, well, yeah, I guess I sort of think about the color I use as being found color, because it is in commercially, you know, so that's I use a acid-free colored paper, but it is within that sort of range, what's available. I don't, and that's, you know, in other works, it's what I can find and in different sort of situations. But I mean, I think it's, so I usually choose, so I choose a range of colors, and then there's a certain logic to how the works are, the colors are put in. So they just have to be in pairs of two, and, you know, and I just sort of make, I guess, decisions as I go. But like, I do find it interesting about how we relate to color. And like, I've had people help me do this before. And in one of the works, there was a lot of like blue and yellow, which is the color of a football team here in Australia. And so it sort of has there's a lot of those interesting things about personal people, how I relate to color and, you know, culturally and etc. With this work in particular, something you actually said before, which I didn't like, about talking about light and the difference in like sunsets and things. And I mean, I had the experience, you know, Perth is incredibly, you know, it's a very bright sort of searing light, you know, it's not sort of soft in any way. Because, you know, I had the experience of going to Finland, and I went up to the northern part of Finland, into Lapland, and they have an experience, you know, like the light there is so soft and blue, and, you know, there is something called the blue moment, the Sinin Hetki or something, which I found really interesting. Oh, I can hear myself again. But so with this work, I guess I was thinking about, you know, there's sort of, it's very hot, the colors are hot, and I guess this is sort of relating to place. where I am, I suppose. And I also, I guess I was thinking about what LA is like in my mind, similar sort of, bright light, blue sky, hot, hot temperatures sort of thing. So that was sort of something which came into my, which sort of affected the palette that I used for this work.
And then Jonny, I'm from reading about your work, I know that color is often very specific within a body of work, and sort of sampled directly from sources and then sort of transformed or abstracted away from the original source. Can you talk a little bit about what that was maybe for the works in this show? Or
Yeah, sure. I used to do a lot of music many years ago, and I was obsessed with the really early forms of sampling and taking a sound and turning it in combination into something else. And I guess I've applied that same logic to the way that I choose colors. And I started with interest in makeup, looking at glam rock and musicians and idols and icons that have been exciting and effective and evocative, like David Bowie and Deborah Harry, over time, and then digitally sampling, say, like the zigzag on David Bowie's forehead or the eyeshadow on Deborah Harry from a particular album cover and creating a whole color palette from that for a show. So it's very specific and kind of obtuse and obscure, but it's kind of like, for me, it's a bit like a soundtrack to work to in a way when I'm making the show. So for our show, I was thinking like Rebecca about light, especially I found just being in LA last year and coming back to Sydney, there's an incredible similarity between the light conditions. And there's a feeling that I get from the sunsets in both Sydney and Los Angeles that really strike a chord within me. And then the other thing I was thinking about was fast food in Los Angeles. It's always been amazing, like just driving in and out of a place, so many different places, and getting food from when I was young, when I first went there. And that's always kind of struck with me. And so I thought it would be funny to put the burger painting in. It's called Burger with the Light, because I like puns, like burger with the lot, but with the light. And it was based on it started out thinking about Robert Irwin's shape and forms and thinking, how could I play with that and attenuate that in a way that the work is kind of emanating into the space and sitting into the wall a little bit. And so then I thought that a funny like food relationship would be an entertaining thing to play to in creating the works. So then the 4-panel piece that I didn't actually put in the show in the end had the word fries in it, and then the sloped work that slanted on the wall called Hot Sauce Haze, so thinking about food again, and also that kind of when you have too much chili and you get that slightly woozy feeling, so it's sloping off the wall a little bit. And it kind of the intention of that work is to kind of upset your perception just a touch, just a tiny little bit, and have that kind of response to the work. That was a waffle. I went on and on.
It was an interesting waffle. It was a good waffle.
That was great. I was wondering about Burger, actually. Really, I wanted to know the story behind that work. Because it is, I mean, it was just really funny to see the pastel burger. And I was wondering if it was based on some experience with In-N-Out or the city.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the In-N-Out burger. It was awesome. The first experience.
Yeah, something that I found to be like a little bit of a happy accident, but that's been my favorite part of the installation was the installation of the corner piece in relation to the larger wall work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, because there's this building that's across the street from us that's highly reflective, it bounces light in onto that corner that then bounces onto the ceiling. and it was just like this perfect sort of synergy and expression, I think, of this aspect of your work, right? Which is that the entire space is engaged.
And they affect each other, yeah.
Even the space outside of the gallery in this case is impacting, and how these works function. So I guess, let's see, what else did I want to add? Do you have any more sort of thoughts about this exhibition that you wanted to share? Or I know I'd sent you guys in the email a question about abstraction, which I think could be something to talk about in relation to these works.
In relation to when we were talking about my thoughts of Los Angeles and Sydney and their relationship, I think I was also thinking about the idea of the horizon, and the horizon being this kind of unattainable place that you can never get to. And it's the place that everybody aspires to get to, this feeling of escape. And very much feel that both in Sydney and Los Angeles, they're kind of places of great hope historically. They're also kind of a bit glitzy as well. And they've also got these incredible sunsets and sunrises. And I was kind of thinking about, and I think about a lot within my work, the idea of desire, the idea of hope and escape, and like providing this this eternal escape that you can hang on your wall and have there forever. And why do we want to escape eternally?
That's interesting. Los Angeles does have a very specific relationship to surface, in that there is, right, this veneer that's over the top, and that sort of directly confronts you, and then underneath it there are much more sort of subtleties of how space is structured, or how just daily life operates. And I guess that really is the same in your work, is that there's this sort of initial interaction, which is quite, I think, like performative and charged. And then the longer you sit with it, the sort of more subtle the relationship to the work comes out. And Rebecca, there's also a little bit of that quality to your work as well, right? The sort of initial interaction and then the durational interaction, which is more, at least for me, has been the like listening to the work, as opposed to that sort of first, really playful engagement of like watching the cards turn. It then became about like the rhythm of it and listening to it.
I like something you said before about how, I guess you're getting an experience, I suppose, being in the gallery all the time, because I've made a few works like that where I almost start to feel like I've made them for the people that are actually, actual gallery staff, because they're the ones that actually really get to experience the work as it changes across the day. Or, I've done a large works at Carriage Works in Sydney last year, which was using dichroic film on all the windows of a building, and so it sort of changed across the day. But I think with COVID and stuff, I think basically only the director was in there, so he had sort of like this sort of experience with this work that was that most people weren't getting, just because I guess just being there all the time versus just visiting for a moment or something. So I quite like that.
Do you ever make work, Rebecca, and live with it in your studio for a long period of time, intentionally, to see how it affects you over a durational period, your different times of day, but also the different moods and things that you bring to the space as you experience the work?
Well, I do, but it's like my studio is quite dark. It's like an old cottagey thing, and so so I guess there's been like something like Carriage Works or some of those other more really site-based things. It's very different to what it is.
That makes good sense.
But yes, as much as possible, for sure. But studios are funny things, right? They're sort of little holes in the ground, sort of thing. Dark.
Yeah, they're pretty strange. And I've got to say, I kind of feel quite jealous of Nikita, and over this period of time where you make works and you want to experience them in the space and see how they they do how you feel about them over a durational period of time. But as the artist, I mean, we didn't even get to go in this circumstance, but historically you go in, you might spend 2 or 3 days setting up the work, get it installed and done, and then you go back for an opening, and you might go back in to kind of, I don't know, chat about something, and that's your experience, and then you pack it up. And then like Nikita, especially if you do actually enjoy the work, you have the experience of it over that period of time, which would be so different. I would kind of like to experience it in the gallery a bit more.
It has been really nice, and it's also, this was one of our first shows, and also just generally one of the first shows that was just open again after our quarantine. So we, especially in the first couple weeks of the exhibition, we had people coming in and being like, this is the first art I've seen in person.
Oh, cool.
In 6 months or a year. And I think it was a really sort of joyful exhibition for that kind of participation, because the works are so inviting. And also we've had people come back multiple times and see it at different points in the day, and it changes.
Oh, cool.
And
that's great to hear.
Yeah, it's just been nice to watch, to see people having that experience, because I mean, I know for myself, I didn't see anything in person for so long. And it really is, you don't get that experience from images.
Yeah, so true.
No, you don't. I think it's been an interesting period of time too, how everything has tried to sort of move online and everyone's trying to pivot and things. But yeah, it really, it is about being with something in a space, isn't it? And how you relate to it. And yeah.
Very much so.
Okay, well, do you guys feel like we've sort of covered everything, or is there anything else that you want to touch on?
Did we talk about abstract? I guess, we talk about our relationship to abstraction? I guess, I mean, I don't have much to say about that. I guess I
didn't either.
Well, I suppose I think about abstraction, I guess the reason I was always interested in that rather than creating something which was, realistic or figurative, was that also it sort of creates a mirror for people, to sort of, read into it how they and respond to the work. You sort of set up a stage, the materials do what they do, and people can sort of, there's space for them, I suppose. That's what I've always found quite interesting about abstraction, and why I've been, sort of, I guess, interested in abstract sort of works and things, and I guess why I wanted to sort of exist in that sort of language. That's about it. That's all.
I think, what did you say? It's something about it feeling particularly relevant now, I guess. I was thinking abstraction's really very much out of fashion at the moment. And it was so nice to do this show, because it feels like an important show. And I also agree with Rebecca in the sense that you're providing cues, and you're kind of reducing an idea down to this very kind of simple looking, perhaps, or you kind of reducing it right down and leaving an environment that's completely open to interpretation. And like Rebecca earlier saying, everyone's subjective and has a different experience to everything. And instead of the type of work that does really over-explain things and lead you down particular paths, it's nice to have something that's so open that you can interpret it in any way you want. And that's also what I think is the important thing about abstraction, is it can be more, in a way, very timeless and not so linked to a specific time and way of thinking. And also, I think I was looking at John Armleder talking about reproducing, or the idea of copying, how it can just be interpreted in different ways in different time periods with different frames of mind, which actually kind of regenerates the work and gives it more meaning and makes it more interesting, which I thought was a really interesting way of thinking about it.
That was something that Yoke actually spoke on a little bit in relation to her objects, right? Is this that they are very much rooted in a specific time and place, but through her treatment of them with color and abstracting of the forms in the wrapping, and the way that the viewer interacts with that, does sort of take it outside of time in that way. So there's this they can then take on a different context when they're in Los Angeles or
yeah, exactly.
they're in other parts of the world and in different times. And I think that that's something, sort of a thread that ties all of these works together, is this notion of abstraction as a tool to actually create possibility.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, well, I guess that sort of about
Cool.
wraps it up.
That's a wrap.